Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Good to be here. Today is August 30th, 2020. It's going to be a fun day. It's Sunday. Dogs are barking for no particular reason. Who knows? And it's a lazy Sunday. You know, this is the last week of August. Next week is September, which is going to be a busy month. We accomplished a lot this month. It's been a lot of fun. A huge amount of software was written. A massive amount of work went into getting the exchanges where they need to go, getting the wallet upgraded. Cardano's node 1.19 is 100 times faster in some benchmarks from the 1.18 node. It's now in full distribution, so it's on mainnet and it's also on Flight. Yoroi went through a heck of a time getting upgraded, but they're almost where they need to be. And Ledger and Trezor support is fully enabled for Ada Lite. I believe Trezor support is fully enabled for Yoroi, and I think Ledger support's working its way through. And we're already in negotiations for a big firmware update for stake pool operators to allow stake pool operators to use a Ledger or Trezor device as part of their security scheme so that they can air gap keys without having to go out of their way for that. I'm also interested in things like multi-sig pledge to see if we also can do KES on the Ledger, and that's going to be a lot of work. So they're bidding that out. We're also bidding out a multi-sig contract with ATIX, and they're discussing architecture with us on how to bring multi-sig into. We have scripting support for it in the low level, but we need to build a beautiful user experience for it. So they're going to bid that out, pull it into Daedalus, QR code center, hardware wallet center. All these things are coming soon. So the wheels are moving. Another thing is that there's been a lot of debate and discussion in the community already, a lot of consternation from the smaller stake pool operators, and is exactly what I expected to see. People care enough about Cardano to have divergent opinions about where our parameters should go. That means people understand the parameters, they have an opinion about it, they're thinking deep about it, and that's exactly what you want to see. So we're still collecting those ideas and we're thinking ourselves, and there's a process going on about how is K going to evolve and Pledge going to evolve and so forth. Every 5 days, the network continues to get more and more decentralized. As I mentioned, it's a slow drum beat, and it just gets louder and louder and louder and louder as we get closer and closer to D = 0. We're almost at a point where 25% of all blocks are made by the community. Just a few weeks ago, it was none. That tells you how significant the movement is already. And September is the first month where we're going to begin rolling out the peer-to-peer implementation. So the peer-to-peer governor is ready to go, and they're turning things on, and the network team is going to be working hard. Half the team is off for August. So we decided not to do it in August, but push it to September. But that should take about 8 weeks from start to finish. Might have a longer tail depending upon what we find as we roll it out, but that will considerably improve performance in certain respects. Or certain people get unlucky and they connect the bad relays. And also, it's a truly fully decentralized network when you're no longer using relays from stake pool operators or from us, but also every single person running a full node is now contributing to the system. That's a really beautiful thing. So D is moving in the right direction. Peer-to-peer is moving in the right direction. We're having a great discussion about economic parameters, and that's moving in the right direction. There's already discussion about stake pool guilds. There's already discussion about delegation portfolios. I've made it the highest priority to get one-to-many delegation where it needs to go. So there's a huge product effort right now to get that done as quickly as we can. And that's just one side of the organization. So that's the Shelley side of the organization. Meanwhile, in Gogan land, a different group of people are waking up, having the whip on them. And we're talking about basically a 3-phase rollout. So first you have native assets, second you have Plutus foundations, and third you have the Plutus application framework. Now native assets are being able to go from a single asset ledger to a multi-asset ledger, and that's a lot of work and there's a lot to do there. Plutus foundations is kind of like the JVM versus Java. It's saying that it's the base foundations, the core of the language. So if you can write assembly or you can write the higher level representations of it, you'll be able to write smart contracts, but that's not exactly super user friendly. But you have to have the JVM to have Java. You have to have the CLR to have C#. et cetera, et cetera. So it makes sense to roll that out first and then put on top of it the beautiful development experience and so forth. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can do them in parallel, just, they have all kinds of things working their way through. So big conversations going on, a lot of implementation work going on, especially with de-risking the Ledger team. And that's not Ledger, the hardware device, that's Ledger, the Cardano node Ledger, so the Ledger rules of the system. There's an enormous set of work there, and we're adding more people. We're trying to shift things around so we can accelerate things as much as we can, because we have to kind of pull in all this Goguen work into Shelley now that Shelley's here and Shelley's ready to receive it. So Ramon, our CTO, has taken a personal interest in this, and he's micromanaging that process. So he's personally involved in the resourcing. He's personally involved in the day-to-day meetings. Normally you don't have a CTO do that, but we want to get this out as quickly as we can. So we're making sure that our best people are micromanaging the process to get it done, and a huge amount to do. I'm also starting to give out some fixed cost contracts and bring in old people. We've begun pretty significant negotiations with runtime verification to upgrade and modernize Yella, and also restart the K and SBC work for a variety of reasons internally. But part of these conversations give us some insight into what the testing frameworks on the Ethereum side look like. And they've been working with Algorand and Tezos and all these other people. So they have a pretty good understanding of what the development experience is across the board for all of the third generation platforms. So we're talking to their guys and we're saying, okay, where do we need to sit for Cardano for us to be competitive in that respect? We kind of have an internal idea. And we have an idea from the Haskell space because there's 35 years of knowledge and experience there. But it's really good to do a competitive cross-section and look at your competitors and say, okay, well, what are they really prioritizing and looking like? And so it's convenient to talk to tool builders in the space because through their open source repos and just the projects that they've been working on, it gives you a good sense of where things sit. And there's some great frameworks like truffle replacements called Firefly, for example, and that's a really cool thing. So we'll make an announcement at a later date when we've signed something, but that's looking promising. We're also going to see if we can bring all the Haskell stuff into the Cardano ecosystem, because as I've mentioned, there's 35 years of history there. I want to make sure that that works on day one, because that stuff is amazing, and it's what allowed us to launch Shelley without the whole system exploding in our face. So I would like those tools to exist on your side, the developer's side. Another thing is we're going to build a DSL for smart contract specification. So basically this opens up the prospect of certified contracts. So you have a design and then you have the implementation. You'll be able to prove that the implementation is correct against the design. This has been done several times for example, certified ERC20 tokens and so forth. It's generally very hard because the tools are not so good. They require a lot of domain expertise and they're very heavy. So there's a lot of discussion about how do we build a lightweight specification DSL that can sit in tandem with your contract, and then you can verify properties about it so that you can use it as a basis for model checking and quick check and all these types of things that exist in the formal methods community, and you can verify that your contract is right. So there's going to be a whole thread of work that's starting to really rev up. We've already done a lot of that with Marlowe because Marlowe's a Turing incomplete DSL. Means you can use SAT solvers and all this other stuff to verify that it's right. We did that in Bulgaria years ago when we planted those trees. We actually wrote a contract and used a SAT solver to prove it. But in a more generic sense, with Plutus, for example, it's a little harder. So there's some work there. We're also working on the imperative side so that you have a procedural imperative way of doing development and not just functional. So you'll have a JavaScript-esque like experience at some point. And so I/K gave a grant to Mune for around $50K to explore that. And then based on their results, we'll accelerate, speed up that work stream to make sure that that comes in a reasonable competitive time period. So that's on the infrastructure level. But then there's DeFi. And I've become very obsessed with DeFi lately. We've looked at the entire competitive DeFi space, hundreds of pages of reports, lots of interviews, lots of discussions. We also looked at all the most popular DeFi things. Already, some of it's starting to leak out despite our efforts to keep it a little boxed in because we'd like some announcements. For example, we are partnered with Emergo, and we're right now working on the logistics of a stable coin with them that we're going to be building first on Ergo to verify everything works correctly, and then we'll pull it over into Cardano. And this is going to be an algorithmic stable coin. We think it'll be significantly better than MakerDAO. That's just one of many DeFi things that are going on right now, but we're not going to announce any of that until a little bit later. In terms of marketing, this week we have a marketing director coming on board, IO Global. We spent months interviewing people, people from Fortune 500 companies, people from the startup sphere. The particular candidate, Liza, she has more than 20 years of experience, really brilliant gal who has a great background, and I think she's going to fit very well in our culture. We had so many really qualified people for that job. It was initially quite hard until we interviewed her and we said, this looks just right. And she's a direct report to me. I don't have that many direct reports, but she reports to me. And we're going to focus a lot on product marketing and comparison marketing. So product marketing in particular, we're looking at things like what is Ouroboros, what is Plutus, what is extended UTXO, what is the network stack that we have, and why is it better, and compare and contrast it to Algorand and Tezos and EOS. And the goal is to create very understandable product marketing content that the community can use to really showcase what we've built. We spent 5 years doing this. We're really proud. We're really excited. We're really fired up about it. The problem is it's a bit obfuscated by complexity because it all lives in the world of math and science and peer review stuff and engineering. And I'm sorry, you can't just give a person a formal specification and say, oh, here you go, it's self-evident. No, you need to really put the effort and time in to get it where it needs to go. So she's the first of many hires. We're hiring a dedicated dev experience person to worry about ACID for open source projects, specifically for Plutus-oriented projects. So ACID is developer acquisition, developer collaboration, developer incentives, and application deployment. You have to have a strategy for that if you're going to scale. And we think we have some really good ideas, but we now has come to make sure that someone is directly accountable for it. So I've taken a keen interest in this, and we will make sure it gets done. The foundation's also doing their own things as well on ACID. And I think probably the breakdown is going to be that we take a more floss and smaller oriented approach, and they'll probably focus more on Fortune 500, which is great because they have a lot of great people there that are very Fortune 500 obsessed. And I think we can get some great adoption in those circles. Emergo is also doing something. And so we're going to kind of divide and conquer and try to cast as broad of a net as possible. But all that's coming down the pipe, and you're going to see a lot of great output from that. It's important to understand that firms like McCann, that was retained by the foundation, and it helped them get Cardano.org where it needed to go. And I think that was a good output. But IO Global, we haven't done enormous amounts of product campaign or direct consumer marketing for Cardano yet. So this is kind of new to us, and that's why we brought on such a strong marketing director. And I think the time has come for us to really push hard on that, because we're getting to a point where everything's turning on from Voltaire to Gauguin. And there are very real differences in what we've done from where the market is currently at. And I think those differences need to be communicated because people really need to understand how special Cardano is above and beyond the words, peer review and formal methods and good engineering and so forth. It's really important that people understand specifics of why it's better and what it does differently and how we roll it out and so forth. And I think that that's going to get people very excited. Voltaire's coming along great. In the month of September, ballots are going to come through. The DC is going to open up and blossom up, the DC fund. And for the first time ever, the blockchain is going to start paying people. It's going to start rolling out money to projects, ideas, as our community begins to participate. And every 6 to 8 weeks, that's going to continue and grow and grow and grow. And we have a huge group of people that are just thinking about experiences. We have a cell phone app. It'll get into Daedalus. Hopefully it'll get into Yoroi as well. So we'll have a lot of great interfaces for voting and collaboration and communication, and we'll just keep adding more voting systems and more concepts into that framework, and it'll evolve over time to a point where it can comfortably run the entire Cardano ecosystem. So I'm really happy about that. It's been a difficult project to kind of get really where it needed to be, and there was an enormous amount of work that had to go into it, and there's a really complicated crypto, but that's okay. We worry about complicated crypto. That's our job. You guys worry about getting Cardano to the next step. That's our job together. Okay. So a lot going on there, a lot to think about there. Overall, the network is stable and really good. And August was a very successful month. It was a frustrating month because not everything worked as well as it could. But on the other hand, Shelley shipped, and people are running the network, and to an extent that they have an opinion on how the network should be run. And sometimes that's divergent from ours. Think about that. It's pretty amazing. Not all of our critics beat the hell out of us for a long time, saying we'd never even be here. And now that we're here, they say, oh, here was easy. The next step is hard. No, here was hard. Make no mistake. Very, very hard. Took years. And the next step is fun. The next step is where we get to create and we get to produce and do some cool stuff. Negotiating a lot of deals under the hood, lots of strategic partnerships under the hood. We'll probably make an announcement towards the end of the month of when the Goguen Summit is going to be, like we did with the Shelley Summit before. And we'll try to make that just as big. Shelley Summit with over 10,000 people. Maybe we can do 20 for Goguen. Dial it up, take it up, keep it going, keep pushing forward. We need to keep this train rolling. One last thing on the DeFi in particular. I've taken a very keen interest in it. And as I mentioned, I don't have a hell of a lot of direct reports. Marketing is now, but I'm also directly involved in a lot of the DeFi discussions that we have and trying to make sure that those get to the next level. They're properly resourced, they have the right teams behind them, and that they're moving quickly. The reality is that first mover advantage is actually a disadvantage in DeFi. Those network effects were ephemeral and often covered with mistakes and scars and explosions. You actually want to be in the imitator, the second mover category for DeFi. And I think we'll have a lot more luck than the first movers did in the space. And there'll be a mass exodus because those first mover architectures and designs are just too inflexible. And Cardano's much better suited as a platform. So that's what 2021 is going to be about. There's going to be a lot of that fighting and a lot of that pushing. And we're in it to win it, guys. We're real excited about it. Oh yeah, one last thing. Bitrex. We've been working with their engineers. They've been working with us. The principal cause of the issues is that Bitrex was the very first exchange to list ADA. So they were using the oldest and the worst software. And what happened is the longer that software ran, the more fragmented and balled up and gummed up and gucked up it got. And when we switched over to the Byron reboot, and the first time the exchanges got access to that, it was in February of this year, most of the exchanges migrated to that. And so the delta between the Byron reboot software and Shelley was not really significant. So most exchanges in a week to 2 weeks were able to migrate over. Bitrex stayed on the older software because when they tried to migrate, they had some issues with it, and they said, well, we'll come back to it. And so now they're paying that migration cost with us today. And it's nobody's fault. It is what it is. It's reality. And they've been working hand in glove with us to try to untangle that ball and get things where they need to go. So the status is that the software is working, it's running. It's just there's some performance issues with it having to do with address creation and coin selection that make it really not in a position where it can run in a production environment. So what we've done is we've created a special test suite specifically for the replicate what's going on with their wallet. And we have a wallet on our side which has about 2% of all the ADA and testnet on it. And we're doing a bunch of stuff to try to emulate their environment and get a better understanding of why those performance slowdowns exist, because they're very difficult to replicate with our normal test suite. It's just hard to replicate that. And we're getting to a point where we're able to replicate things and get a deeper profiling understanding. And once we have that, what we can do is figure out where exactly this issue is occurring and get a proper migration done. The good news is that once that's finished off, it's done forever, and they fully migrated, everything turns back on. The even better news is that that tech is the exact same tech that's going to live in your wallets when we update the wallet backend and the node. Meaning if you ever got to a point where your Cardano wallet has hundreds of thousands of accounts and they're all like tens of thousands of transactions, your desktop client would actually be able to support that. So you're using enterprise grade software. So, there's a little bit there, and it's unfortunate. And, these things happen with all upgrade tails, and we do our best to work our way through them. But the good news is it's a finite thing. It's a ball of string, and we're kind of running out of string. And it's a one-time thing. So when, for example, we go from Shelley to Goguen, there's going to be very little changed in that for the listing experience. And so what that effectively means is that the exchanges should probably be, when the hard fork combinator event occurs, green the day of, as opposed to some being down for weeks, for example. It's just when we went from Byron to Shelley, we weren't just going from one design to another design. We were going from a very bad design to a really good design, and all the consequences of that very bad design in history and years of operation to a really good design. And so when we go from Shelley to Goguen, we're going from a really good design to a really good design with a lot of foresight about how to do these upgrades. So all things considered, that there's been no network disruption, nothing went down. Overall, that's pretty good. But unfortunately, some things get beaten up along the way, and this is just one of them. But I really admire the patience and the level of cooperation that they've had, and I understand how deeply frustrating it can be as a Bitrex customer. And I'm deeply frustrated too, because I want everything to work perfectly, and I want everybody to be happy. Occasionally, this stuff just comes up. So we're not sleeping on the job, and they're certainly not. We're working together, and people are every single day waking up, analyzing things, reading logs, issuing patches. And we went from dozens of problems to just one major problem, and that we have a pretty good understanding of, and we're kind of working our way through. So that's the Bitrex situation. Hopefully I'll have some better news next week. I was expecting something this week, but unfortunately we just ran out of time. And hopefully next week I'll have something really good to say about it. And it'd be really nice before September, but we'll see. It is what it is. Okay.